So can you tell me a bit about how this route Bon Voyage breaks down in terms of boulder problem sections and links and everything like that for everyone listening?
Yeah, definitely. So the route starts up my older route from Anot called Le Voyage, which is an 8B plus. You don't have to climb the entirety of the route, so it's not that hard. You probably climb maybe 8A pluses worth of climbing, the first crux, a little bit of a pumpy traverse, and then you leave the Voyage just before the second crux, which is the kind of classic crack that people might know, and you continue going left across the wall. From there, there's a few like quite big, powerful moves. You go through another non-rest, which is really frustrating because it should be a great rest. It's a huge jug, but your feet are only on smears on this sort of slightly overhanging sandstone wall, so I at least can't really recover there. You do the first kind of hard independent boulder problem on the route, and then I don't know if you can hear the kids. It's wake up time here.
No, I can't hear them.
The first hard independent boulder on the route, which is it's hard to climb, easy to fall off, really hard to grade because it's very, very morpho. So I can kind of manage to do it almost every time, but it's probably the one boulder in the route that I was less certain of every time. You get through that one, and then you get to the last piece of gear on the route and the last resting point. So if you can stand on your feet, the rest is reasonable. And if you can't stand on your feet, then you're just dying. Like the longer you spend in the rest, the worse you're getting. And then from that rest point onwards, and the gear, which is good provided it's placed well, you do like a 20 move, really, really intense sequence of very fingery moves on tiny pockets and edges all the way to the end of the route. So you climb the hardest section of the route. You don't have to stop, place any more gear. It's my favorite style of trad climbing. You can forget about the fact that you're even trad climbing, which always sounds funny when I say that, because it sounds like if I don't like placing gear, I should just go sport climbing. And it's kind of true, but there's something really magical about just being mega run out from your last piece, but knowing you're probably going to be totally fine and you can just 100% concentrate on the climbing. I guess it's probably a little bit like why I really like deep water soloing. It's a similar sort of feeling. It's airy. It is a bit scary, but you know you're probably going to be okay, and you can just 100% forget about everything else and concentrate on the moves and really lose yourself.
How hard would you say that last bit is in terms of a sequence?
It's really hard for me to actually put a grade on that whole last sequence because it comes down to this big question about am I good in that style or not? But it took me quite a long time to even do the individual moves before talking about doing the individual boulders and linking the whole thing. That was like already a fairly long-term project. And so I'd say that it feels to me at least like 8C-ish difficulty just to do the last section from the last gear to the end of the route. So the big question is basically how pumped do you get on the beginning of the route? How tired are you when you get there? How well you can recover in this rest?
And when you say 8C, are you saying font 8C? Are you saying
no? I wish it was font 8C. I'm not quite there yet. Probably French 8C.
Okay, so French 8C, so that's going to convert back on 20 moves to around probably font 8A plus.
Something like that, but it's a long sequence, so I normally break it down into smaller boulders. I don't really think of it as a long boulder. It doesn't feel like a boulder when you climb it.
Right. Okay.
It definitely feels more like a short kind of snappy power endurance route. But on like almost vertical terrain, slightly overhanging, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees. So it's that funny angle that can kind of start to feel easier once you really understand the positions. It feels absolutely desperate at first, but the more you do it, the more you kind of work out the subtleties. And then eventually, like by the time that I was making final red points, the actual individual moves felt fairly okay. And so I was kind of having to have this like constant dialogue of remembering how the moves felt originally and accepting that they were quite hard, but also knowing that it's the nature of climbing that moves are going to feel easy the more you practice them, and not get too kind of weighed down by the idea that this thing was absolutely desperate. So yeah, I feel like I'm still in that kind of no man's land of not really knowing how hard it is. The biggest thing, I haven't had the chance to share the experience with anybody else. So it helps so much to have another climber on the route with you. Even if they're not necessarily red pointing the whole thing, just to see other people on moves. Like, you might have a move that just doesn't really suit you and you think it's desperate, and then somebody else gets on and they're like, actually, that's kind of okay. And then you just have to accept that this move isn't my thing. But when it's just you, it's so easy to get lost. And yeah. And I know firsthand how it's very easy to get lost within yourself on big projects.
So I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the first ascent stuff. And I always feel like it's something that the general public, and especially, I don't know, I call them the keyboard warriors, do not appreciate. That first ascenting and the nature of a lot of them, especially at the cutting edges, you have to be somewhat protective, somewhat private about them. You can't share them with 5 other of the top climbers in the world, because ultimately you're kind of vying for something which you would personally would really like to do and you're really invested in. And you can't totally rely on others going, you know what, I was really close to doing that, but James, you step forward and take the first ascent, because some people are a little bit more sort of dog eat dog about these things.
Exactly.
So you get stuck.
It does always seem like a little bit, I always feel somehow a little bit guilty or awkward about keeping things secret, because sharing's caring, and it'd be really nice to be super open with projects, and you can learn a lot from climbing with other people, but I think it's more than just saying these routes are so rare. Obviously, when you do find one, you kind of want ultimately to make the first ascent, because we all like doing first ascents, because that's kind of why we're here. But at the same time, you also invest a lot of energy, like physically and mentally, into a project like that, a lot of time, and in doing that, you make the experience for someone potentially coming along and doing it before you so much easier. So it always feels like, I've put in all this effort, I should at least give myself the chance to see it through to the end. But then you find yourself in a situation where I am now, where I've done the thing and I'd really like to have a second opinion on it. And I've been really trying to get that. In fact, one of the reasons we took a little bit of time to come out with the news is that I was calling everybody that I knew that might be interested to come and try this route, and trying to get them to come to Anot with me. I spoke to so many strong climbers over the last 3 weeks.